We're having our conversation with Andy Maddocks, the president of the Boston office of R2Integrated, Influence, Relevance, and the socially networked world. We talked about influence. Now let's talk about relevancy. As I like to put this, when you use the word relevant, Andy, to me it's really benefits versus features. In other words, you could sit there all day long as a company, talk about all the great things you do, but if it's relevant to your consumer, to your end user, it's a benefit. It matters to them.
I think you're absolutely right there. In fact, one of the ways to really get your arm around it, and I'm sure many brand managers do this as an exercise, is we ask ourselves, how do I make a brand decision today when I'm going to make a transaction or a purchase with a brand versus how I might have done it 10 years ago? It's going to be radically different. My experience of looking for the benefits in a brand is going to be very much affected by the way in which the brand's information is presented and also the way in which people around the internet position the brand for me outside of the brand's control.
Well, we see in this slide here, scale versus relevancy, reach versus engagement, creative versus technology, and automation versus conversation. The scale versus relevancy really tells it all. A lot of people think you just got to push out this content, but it's got to be the right content.
That's right. And one of the things that the brand manager today has to be very aware of is don't get enamored by the capacity to push a message out at large scale. Don't get enamored at the capacity to automate a lot of what you do, but in fact you've really got to sit back and say, okay, when I'm getting ready to use one of these tools to push my message out across the web, have I really thought through the way in which I've organized my content? Have I designed the content so that it actually clicks with people in the different communities of interest that have built up around the brand?
And as an example of that, let's talk about Microsoft. In full disclosure, they're a partner of yours, you do business with them, but when you talk about offering your communities real value, they're a good example of that, aren't they, Andy?
They sure are. A typical example might be, let's say, security managers, information security managers in organizations. And when they're going to be going out looking for a solution, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to go out on the web, they're going to look for credible resources who know something about the area. They're going to look for people who have bandwidth within, within the bandwidth and reach. That's a good way to put it. There's a scholar, a guy, Michael Wu, who built a very interesting kind of model of that, and what he talks about is that on the influencer side, if you want to influence the message, you've got to have credibility, you've got to have bandwidth, and then you've got to sync up with the needs of the person who's looking. So in this case, it would be a security manager. So is the message the right information? Is it relevant to the person who's looking? Is the timing right? Is the message there when the person needs it? And as you know, a lot of security managers, they're not going to be just looking for a message somewhere that's broadcast. They're going to be looking in the middle of the night. They're going to be looking after dinner. So it's going to be a responsibility of the brand manager to make sure that information is there at the time they need it. So timing is a big thing. Also, it needs to be in the right place on the web. There are some communities that are more credible as a community than others, so the right place makes a big difference. And finally, the right person. When you trace back the message of the brand, you want it to hit the right person. Well,
influencer as well as influence.
Exactly.
He's Andy Maddocks of R2Integrated. I'm Butch Stearns of the Pulse Network. This is part of our Spotlight on IMS series. Thanks for being a part of this conversation.